Her name is Rachel. We met in our late 20s. I was running a small construction company in Central Florida, just 3 guys, a rusted pickup, and a whole lot of drive. She was doing manicures out of a rented chair in the back of a strip mall salon. What caught my attention wasn't just her looks, though she had plenty of those. It was her ambition. She talked about someday owning her own place, running a spa with her name on the window. I remember thinking, I can help her get there. Over the years, I did just that. As my business grew, I saved. I skipped vacations, worked weekends, took on projects I didn't even want, all to put money aside for something bigger. Something for us. And when she said, I'm finally ready to open that salon, I was all in. We found a spot downtown, run down, water damage, bad wiring. But I saw the bones. I gutted it myself, pulled permits, laid tile, painted walls, installed custom lighting, and rebuilt the bathrooms from scratch. All while still running my own company. When it opened, the place was beautiful. Clean lines, soft gold accents, expensive fixtures. It looked like a 5-star hotel lobby. And on the glass door, etched in silver, Rachel and CO. She cried when she saw it, hugged me and whispered, "You made my dream real." At the time, that meant everything to me. I didn't put my name on any of it, not officially. That was her dream, after all. But I paid for everything, from the lease deposit to the espresso machine in the break room. We used my savings, my credit, my connections. I joked to my buddies that I'd married my way into a second business, only this one had better smelling clients. The first year was rough, like any startup, but we got through it. I'd stop by on my lunch breaks just to check in, help fix a loose hinge or patch a scuffed wall. I kept being the quiet support behind the scenes. Never asked for credit, never made demands. I figured, we're a team. What's hers is mine, right? Then came year 3. That's when the little things started. She got cold, distant. Started dressing like she was headed to a modeling shoot instead of a staff meeting. Her phone was always in her hand, screen tilted away. She began spending more nights at networking events and less time at home. And when I'd ask how the salon was doing, she'd smile and say, "Great," but change the subject fast. I didn't push. I wanted to trust her. I told myself she was just busy, that maybe I was being paranoid. Until one night, she came home late, tossed her purse on the table, and looked me straight in the eye. "We need to talk. You know that phrase. You don't forget it once you've heard it used as a weapon." I nodded slowly, waiting. "I've been thinking. I want to run the salon on my own. No more check-ins, no more help, no more, fix this light, or check that leak. It's mine now, completely." I blinked. "It's always been yours, Ratch. I just helped build it." She looked down, fidgeted with her ring. "Right, but I mean legally. I filed for a restructure. I brought in a business partner. We're changing the ownership." My jaw tightened. "Business partner?" She finally looked up. "Derek. He's helping with growth." Derek. The name hit harder than it should have. I'd heard it before. The marketing consultant who started hanging around the shop. Always too friendly, too smooth. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything. I just nodded. And I said the one sentence that started the next chapter of this story. "All right, if you think you don't need me, let's see what you can build without me." After that night, something inside me shifted. I didn't storm out. I didn't beg. I just started paying attention. You learn a lot about someone when you stop talking and start listening. Rachel assumed I'd just keep fixing pipes and paying invoices. She didn't know that I'd been quietly preparing for something like this for a long time. Not because I didn't love her, but because I'd been burned once before in business, and I'd learned my lesson. I had backups for the backups. Still, I had no idea how deep her betrayal went until I opened the file drawer in our home office, the one she never touched, and found a stack of paperwork I'd signed a few months earlier. She had told me they were for business insurance, something about liability coverage for the salon, but they weren't insurance forms. They were ownership transfers. Rachel had slipped them in casually one evening while I was eating dinner and she was in a rush. "Just sign these real quick, babe," she said. "It's that legal stuff we talked about." I barely glanced at the headers. She was my wife. I trusted her. I signed every page like an idiot. Now I stood there holding those same pages, my stomach in knots. The transfer gave her full ownership, not just of the business, but of the branding, the client list, even the equipment. And worse, it mentioned a secondary equity partner listed as Derek S. Nolan. That smug, preppy clown from the salon. The guy with the fake smile and expensive haircut. She hadn't just taken what we built together, she handed half of it to the man she was sleeping with behind my back. I didn't break anything. I didn't cry. I sat down, opened a beer, and started taking notes. You see, I've always believed in quiet revenge. Not out of spite, out of principle. When someone spits on what you gave them, you don't raise your voice, you raise the stakes. I made 3 calls the next morning. First was to a guy named Frank, a commercial lawyer I'd met years ago on a renovation job. Second was to my accountant, Mitch, who owed me more than a few favors. And the third was to an old friend from the county clerk's office, just to confirm what I already suspected. Rachel had filed the restructure 2 weeks earlier. She hadn't said a word about it, but she'd already moved salon funds into a new business account, under the name RSN Enterprises. RSN. Rachel and Derek. It hit me then, they'd been planning this for a while. I wasn't just being pushed out, I was being erased. The next time I saw her, she acted like everything was fine. She was brushing her hair in the mirror, wearing a silk robe I'd bought her last Christmas. How was your day? She asked, not even looking at me. Productive, I said. Got some paperwork done. That's nice, she replied, like we were 2 roommates sharing a kitchen. She kissed me on the cheek and said she was going out to dinner. Business dinner, of course. I didn't ask with who. Instead, I went to the garage, pulled out an old notebook, and flipped to a page I hadn't touched in 5 years, a list of every name I trusted in real estate, contracting, banking, and law. I wasn't going to play the fool in her little drama. I was going to dismantle the stage she thought she owned, quietly, carefully, one nail at a time. But I needed one more thing, evidence. So I stopped by the salon the next afternoon while she was in a meeting. I greeted the front desk girl, who looked like she'd seen a ghost. I walked in like I still owned the place, because, in my head, I always had. And in a way, I still did. In the break room, tucked in the corner file cabinet, I found what I was looking for: vendor invoices, payroll summaries, tax forms. They hadn't even locked them up. Then I noticed something else, a contract on the desk. Half-written, and signed. It was for a second location. A new salon, under RSN Enterprises, funded by a loan Rachel had no idea she didn't qualify for. I smiled. Because I did. I decided to stop playing the background character in my own life. A few days after I found that contract, I walked into the salon like nothing had changed. I wore jeans, boots covered in dust, and a t-shirt with a tear in the sleeve. Just enough to make them think I was still just the guy who patched drywall and fixed sinks. The front desk girl, Melissa, froze when she saw me. She looked between me and the hallway like she wasn't sure if she should warn someone. Is Rachel in? I asked. She's in a meeting, she said. Perfect. I'll wait. I didn't wait. I walked straight to the back. They were in the main office, Rachel and Derek. He was leaning against the desk like he owned it, his blazer slung over the back of the chair, shirt unbuttoned just enough to look casually important. He was one of those guys you just wanted to slap the second he opened his mouth. Rachel looked up when she saw me, startled, then annoyed. Hey, I said, keeping my voice calm. Thought I'd stop by. See if the new hotshot partner had any ideas for the plumbing leak you texted me about last week. Derek didn't even stand up. He gave me one of those smug, closed-lip smiles. You must be the handyman, he said. I didn't blink. Something like that. He extended a hand like he was offering me a favor. Derek Nolan. I wiped drywall dust off my palm before I shook it. I know who you are. Rachel stepped between us. Babe, I told you I'd handle it. We're fine. Derek's already got a contractor lined up. Did he? I asked, glancing at him. Hope he's bonded. And licensed. Code enforcement gets real picky with salons. I've got it covered, Derek said, voice smooth. I nodded. I'm sure you do. Just checking. Wouldn't want the place shut down over a leaky drain. I let the silence hang for a second, then gave Rachel a look she couldn't quite read. She used to be good at reading me. Not anymore. Anyway, I said, turning to leave. Tell me if the pipes explode. I'll bring popcorn. I didn't get far before Melissa caught up with me in the hallway. Hey, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. I probably shouldn't, but... She handed me a folder. Just slid it into my hand like it was nothing. I found this on the copier yesterday. Thought it looked off. Inside was a printout of payment records. Looks like Rachel and Derek were already funneling a chunk of the salon's revenue into a new bank account. The header said, RSN Holdings, same as the name I'd seen on the contract. But what made my stomach tighten was a highlighted note on the last page. It said, Proposal, mortgage primary residence as capital for Phase 2 expansion. My house. Our house. The one I paid for, in full, 10 years ago. She was planning to put it up as collateral, without telling me. I walked out into the parking lot in a fog of disbelief and fury. Not the explosive kind. No yelling. Just a slow, heavy cold that settled into my chest and stayed there. That night, I opened a bottle of scotch I'd been saving since our anniversary 2 years back. Poured a glass. Sat at the kitchen table. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. That would give her power. I wasn't going to demand answers, she'd just lie. No, I was going to watch. Gather. Set the trap. Derek thought I was some clueless husband in steel-toe boots. He didn't know I'd built a business from scratch, outlasted recessions, and negotiated contracts with guys 10 times smarter than him. He thought I was out of the picture. He had no idea I was writing the ending. I didn't sleep much after that night. Funny thing is, Rachel didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. Either way, she was too busy playing CEO with Derek to see what was happening right under her nose. While she was out taking Instagram photos of lattes and face creams, I was building a case. First, I called Mitch, my accountant, and told him I needed a full financial picture of the salon's past 3 years. Not the numbers she gave the IRS. The real ones. Mitch wasn't cheap, but he owed me. And he had a way of finding what other people tried to hide. Next, I paid a visit to Frank, the lawyer I'd worked with years ago when a supplier tried to sue me over faulty wiring. Frank's the kind of guy who wears cowboy boots with a 3-piece suit. You might think he's slow, until you realize he doesn't waste a single word. I brought him everything. Contracts, emails, a photo I'd quietly snapped of that Phase 2 proposal sitting on her desk. Frank read through it all in silence. When he finished, he closed the folder, looked at me, and said, "She's cooked." Then I called Sam. Sam runs a small bank I've worked with for years. Not a big-name chain, the kind of place where they still know you by name. I asked if Rachel or RSN Enterprises had approached them about a business loan. "Funny you ask," he said. "She came in last week with a guy who called himself her partner. Slick suit. Didn't like the paperwork I asked for. Got cagey fast. Bingo." I asked Sam for a copy of the loan application. He couldn't send it to me directly, but he didn't have to. I already knew what it said. What mattered now was leverage. You see, Rachel had filed RSN Enterprises as an LLC, smart move on paper. But she used our home address as the company's legal headquarters. And that's where she made her mistake, because the deed to that house, still in my name, which meant, legally, I could control how and where it was used, and if it was tied to business debt, I had the right to challenge that in court. Especially if fraud was involved. And oh, there was fraud. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched her slip further into the fantasy. She stopped cooking, stopped sleeping at home half the time, and when she did come home, she was always texting someone, laughing like she'd won the lottery. I kept playing the role she expected. The quiet, dependable husband who just kept to himself. But at night, I made copies of her bank statements. During the day, I moved money out of our joint savings and into a new trust in my name only. By the time she noticed, it would be too late. Then came the slip-up I'd been waiting for. One of her salon girls, Natalie, showed up at my worksite. She looked nervous. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, biting her lip. "Sure," I said, wiping drywall dust from my hands. Rachel's been saying some stuff. About how you're going to lose everything. That Derek's taking over. That you're just the dumb builder who paid for her empire. She said it last night during drinks with the staff. I took a slow breath. Natalie hesitated, then handed me a folded paper. It was a schedule, a list of appointments for the next 3 weeks. But one note caught my eye. Investor dinner, finalize signing. Monday 6 p.m. Glenwood Club. That was it. That was the night she planned to sign the expansion deal, probably try to secure the mortgage loan she didn't qualify for. The final nail. I thanked Natalie, told her I appreciated her honesty. Then I made a call to Frank. "We're ready," I said. He didn't ask for clarification, just said, "About time." Because what Rachel didn't know, what Derek never even thought to check, was that I'd been working behind the scenes to remove my name from anything they could use. I'd already transferred the house title to a separate holding trust. One she couldn't touch. One they didn't even know existed. Everything she thought she owned, was already gone. The day after Natalie gave me that note, I started moving faster. I'd already protected the house, split the finances, and copied everything I could find. But now I needed to pull the plug, silently, permanently. I wasn't just leaving Rachel. I was making sure she couldn't take a single brick of what I built with her. The first step was shutting off the faucet. See, Rachel had no idea the salon's rent was still being paid from a business account that traced back to me. She thought it was on autopilot, that I was too dumb or too checked out to notice the monthly withdrawals. But I noticed, and I stopped them. Next was the supplier account, a shared commercial credit line I'd set up with my construction license years ago. She used it for everything: new chairs, mirrors, shampoo stations, skincare inventory. All of it was under my business umbrella. So I revoked her access. Then I contacted the landlord of the salon property, a man named Howard, whose plumbing I fixed for free last summer when his lake house flooded. I invited him to lunch. Over coffee, I laid it out: you're going to get a call soon. Rachel's going to try to renegotiate the lease under a new name. Probably RSN Enterprises. Howard raised an eyebrow. She already did. Last week. I smiled. Then you'll want to check this. I handed him a file folder. Inside were Derek's previous business filings, 2 LLCs dissolved for non-payment, 1 small fraud complaint, and a civil suit still pending in Pinellas County. All public record. All real. Howard flipped through it slowly. He whistled. And here I was thinking that guy just looked like a liar. I leaned back in my chair. She's trying to remortgage my house to fund a second salon. She doesn't own the house. She thinks she does. Howard chuckled. Well then, you let me know how I can help. I already did, I said. Don't sign a new lease. In fact, let her think she's still got time. We shook hands. That night, Rachel came home around 11, laughing into her phone. She didn't notice the new lock on my home office. Didn't ask where I'd been. She poured herself a glass of wine, kicked off her heels, and said, "We're this close to closing the deal, babe. Can you believe it?" I smiled. No, Ratch. I really can't. She laughed like I was joking. She didn't see the resignation in my eyes. The following morning, I packed up the garage, the tools, the files, the spare hard drive where I kept backups of every business receipt from the last 7 years. I loaded it all into my truck and drove to a storage unit I'd rented across town under my uncle's name. Then I closed our shared bank account, transferred my half into a private trust account, legally airtight, untouchable. When she called to ask why her card was declined at a supply store, I told her I'd look into it. She didn't press. She was too distracted by her fantasy. Meanwhile, I filed an anonymous tip with the county zoning board. Rachel and Derek had submitted renovation plans for the second location, complete with signatures from a fake architect. I made sure the right people saw those forms. 3 days later, I got a call from the city. "There's something fishy going on with that salon project," the inspector said. "You know anything about it?" I paused. "Only that the people behind it aren't who they pretend to be." By the time Monday rolled around, the night of the big investor dinner, I was ready. Derek and Rachel were preparing to sign a lease they thought was approved, a loan they thought was secured, and an expansion they thought was funded by my house. But all of it was based on lies. And I had the receipts to prove it. I just needed one last thing to make the dominoes fall. And that came from Mitch, my accountant. He emailed me a single-page document, a revised operating agreement Rachel and I had signed back when we first opened the salon. Hidden on page 2, in fine print, was a clause she'd forgotten about. If either partner is found to have moved business assets without written consent, all rights to management are forfeited. She'd moved funds to RSN. She never got my consent. The moment she signed anything under that new LLC, she gave up the business. All I had to do was activate the clause. And I would. Very, very soon. I sat in the parking lot of the Glenwood Club for nearly 20 minutes. Not because I was unsure, that part was long gone. I just wanted to see them walk in together. Wanted it burned into my memory. At exactly 5:57 p.m., Rachel stepped out of a white Lexus I didn't recognize, dressed like she was heading to a red carpet event. Derek came around to her side, opened the door like he thought he was James Bond. They both laughed as they walked past the valet, like nothing in the world could touch them. And for the next hour, I let them believe that. What they didn't know was that I had already been in that club earlier that day. I'd spoken to the manager, slipped him a small envelope, and asked for a favor. He didn't ask questions, just nodded when he saw the cash. The private dining room they reserved. I had a copy of everything being printed and signed there, courtesy of the assistant I paid to, accidentally, leave the copier tray running. Rachel and Derek sat down with 2 men in suits, potential investors, they thought. Guys Derek had found through his network. What Derek didn't realize was those 2 men weren't investors at all. They were from a consulting firm I used to work with back in my early days in development, and they were doing me a favor. Derek talked a lot that night, about growth, expansion, beauty branding, product lines. I imagine Rachel sat beside him smiling, nodding, pretending she understood all the lingo. She never cared about numbers, just the glamour of being the boss. They signed papers, smiled for selfies, toasted champagne, and I let them, because while they were busy celebrating, I was filing the documents that made it all worthless. At 6:42 p.m., I emailed Frank, my lawyer, the signed scan of Rachel's forfeiture clause activation. That one clause in our original salon agreement, the one she never read. The one that stated, if any principal owner misappropriates funds or conducts outside business using company capital without consent, they forfeit managerial control, effective immediately. All I needed was proof of fraud. The copies Mitch gave me covered that. Dozens of transactions from the salon's account straight into RSN Enterprises, her little side project with Derek. The documents they just signed, they'd be nullified by morning. But I wasn't done. At 7:15 p.m., I made one last call, to a woman named Tessa. She's smart, sharp, ran her own skin care clinic before selling it for a small fortune. She's also someone I've been quietly seeing for a few months. Nothing inappropriate, just conversation at first. Someone to talk to while Rachel was off networking. But lately, it had turned into something real. Tessa had been waiting for the call. I gave her a green light. You see, Tessa and I had signed papers 2 weeks ago, forming a new LLC. She now owned 51% of the original salon's assets. Not Rachel, not Derek, Tessa. It was legal, it was clean, and it was airtight. She'd never stepped foot in the salon, didn't need to. She had no desire to play boss. She just wanted to invest in something that was run right. That meant I would handle operations, and Rachel would be nothing more than an employee, if she even lasted that long. At 8:12 p.m., I got a text from Melissa, the front desk girl. She's dancing, says she's opening a second location by summer. Derek's ordering dessert like he just bought a yacht. You sure you want me to come in tomorrow? I replied, yeah. Be there by 8 a.m. and bring a camera. That night, I slept like a man who'd been digging his way out of a grave, and finally saw daylight. Not because I got revenge, but because I took back control. She played the game thinking I wouldn't fight. She forgot I was the one who built the board. It started with the credit card terminal freezing up. Then the lights flickered. By the end of the day, 2 stylists had walked out, 1 client left in tears, and Rachel was screaming into the phone while Derek stood useless near the front desk, looking like a substitute teacher who'd lost control of a classroom. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Melissa was, and she recorded everything. The footage showed Rachel flipping through the appointment book, yelling about missing payments, late shipments, something being wrong with the system. Derek tried to blame the software company, then the bank, then finally muttered, we just need to ride this out. Ride what out, exactly? Because every account Rachel tried to access had already been rerouted. Every invoice she'd ignored was now in collections. And every supplier had received a call that morning from a new managing partner, Tessa. A memo went out to all vendors, written by Frank and signed by Tessa's new holding company, clarifying the change in ownership. Effective immediately, all contracts must be reauthorized. Rachel's name wasn't on any of them. Even worse for her, the building lease, the one she thought she was renegotiating with Howard, had quietly expired, and I didn't renew it. Howard didn't either. Instead, we signed a new lease with Tessa's company, the true legal entity now managing the location. By lunchtime, Rachel found herself locked out of the business bank app. By 2 o'clock, the cleaning crew she used every Tuesday skipped their stop. And by 3, I heard from Melissa again. She just asked if you could come in to help with a plumbing issue. Swear to God. I laughed harder than I had in months. Of course she did. Rachel always thought I'd come running. That no matter what she did, I'd be the safety net. The one who cleaned up after her, quietly, without question. That afternoon, I stopped by the salon just once. Not to gloat, just to see the fallout. Derek was pacing outside on the sidewalk, phone pressed to his ear, face pale. When he saw me, his mouth tightened. You, he muttered. Afternoon, I said, adjusting my sunglasses. You set this up. You sabotaged the whole thing. No, I said calmly. I just protected what was mine. You two tried to steal it. He stepped forward like he was ready to get loud. I didn't move. I'll sue, he said. I'll take this whole thing to court. I smiled. Please do. I'd love to see you explain how you financed your expansion with misappropriated funds, forged investor paperwork, and an illegal use of my home address. He blinked. Oh, I added. And I spoke to the state licensing board this morning. Turns out, you never had a valid contractor's license in Florida. Or a business one. Weird, right? Derek didn't say another word. He turned, got into his overpriced car, and peeled off like a kid who just got sent home from detention. Inside, Rachel was sitting in the client lounge with her head in her hands. The salon was empty. The music had stopped. She looked up when I walked in. Her eyes were glassy, confused. For a second, I saw the woman I used to know, the one who cried when we opened this place, who hugged me in the hallway and whispered, "We made it." But that woman was gone. "What did you do?" she asked, voice cracking. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just said, "You should have read what you signed. All of it." She stared at me like she didn't understand. "I built this for you," I said. "And you tried to give it to someone else." Then I laid the final paper on the table, a termination letter. Not dramatic, just formal. "Effective today," I said, "you're no longer an employee. You can take your things. Or don't. Either way, you don't belong here anymore." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, stunned, as I walked out the door. And this time, I didn't look back. Rachel always thought I was too quiet to be dangerous. That was her mistake. It wasn't until 2 days after I fired her that the full truth finally hit her. She tried everything, called the bank, tried to reach out to vendors, even tried to log into the salon's social media accounts. All of it locked. Dead ends. On the 3rd day, she came storming back into the salon, or tried to. But Melissa had already changed the locks. "Let me in," Rachel screamed, pounding on the glass. "This is MY Salon." Melissa didn't even flinch. Just pointed to the sign on the door, the one Rachel hadn't noticed until that moment. New management, Tessa and Company. She froze. The name meant nothing to her. That made it even worse. Inside, the place looked the same. Clean, calm, professional. But the air felt different, like the energy had shifted. Melissa opened the door just enough to slide a manila envelope into Rachel's hand. "She wants you to have this," she said. Then shut the door again. I was parked across the street, watching. Rachel stood on the sidewalk flipping through the documents, her hands trembling. The first page was a formal statement. All managerial and operational rights to the salon had been transferred to Tessa B. Lockhart, per contract executed on file and verified through the Secretary of State's office. The next page listed the grounds: misuse of funds, fraudulent restructuring attempts, and violation of the original partnership clause from the founding agreement. The third page, a scanned copy of her own signature, next to mine, on the clause she never bothered to read. That was when it finally broke through. She looked up from the papers like someone waking from a long dream and realizing it was a nightmare all along. I got out of the truck and crossed the street. She didn't yell this time, didn't try to fake confusion. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You did this." I stopped a few feet from her. "No, Rachel. You did this. I just finished it. You blindsided me." I almost laughed. "No," I said. "You blindsided yourself. You signed papers you didn't read. You handed over control to a man who didn't know the first thing about running a business. And you sold out the one person who built this place with you." She stared down at the folder. "Who is she?" "Who?" "Tessa." I smiled. "She's someone who saw value in something you were too careless to protect. Someone who believes in doing things the right way. Someone who doesn't sleep with business partners behind their husband's back." That landed. I saw it. She bit her lip, trying to hold back emotion. But it wasn't guilt. It was fear. For the first time in her life, Rachel was powerless. No leverage. No spin. No Derek. "Speaking of which, I wouldn't wait for Derek to save you," I added. "He moved out of his apartment yesterday. His business account's frozen. Turns out he's under investigation for a fake COVID relief loan." Her face drained of color. I leaned in slightly. "He used your name as the co-signer." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You may want to get a lawyer," I said. "Or not. Either way, it's not my problem anymore." She stepped back like I'd slapped her. I didn't move. I just turned and walked away. And that was it. No big dramatic ending. No screaming match. Just the quiet, brutal reality that she'd lost. Not because I was cruel. Because I was prepared. Because while she played checkers with her ego, I played chess with everything I had left. I heard later from Melissa that Rachel tried to talk her way back in, said she could help with branding, maybe consult. Tessa shut it down immediately. She had her chance, she said. By the end of that week, Rachel was gone. The salon ran smoother than ever. Appointments filled back up. The energy shifted, less drama, more focus. Clients noticed. But Rachel? She had no title, no equity, no stake, just regret, and an envelope she would never forget. It didn't take long for the walls to close in around Rachel. The first hit came from the bank. A letter stating the business line of credit she opened under RSN Enterprises was in default. Since the company had no collateral and no operating revenue, the debt became personal. She owed every penny. The second hit came from the IRS. Derek had filed RSN's taxes using bogus expenses. When they flagged the inconsistencies, they sent letters to both listed owners. Rachel's name was right there beside his. And the third blow came from Derek himself, or rather, his silence. He vanished, deleted his social media, shut off his phone. Rumor had it he skipped town the night he found out about the ownership change, left behind a lease he never paid and a stack of unpaid invoices. Rachel had no way to reach him, but it didn't stop the calls. Creditors, vendors, legal offices, all coming for her. She even tried calling Frank, my lawyer. He didn't answer. And me? I didn't lift a finger. I just watched it all unfold from a distance. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about clarity. Watching the truth finally catch up to someone who'd been sprinting from it for years. Then came the social fallout. See, when you run a small business, your reputation is your currency. And Rachel had built hers on illusion, the glamorous, boss babe image, the curated photos, the borrowed confidence. But once word spread that she'd been fired from her own salon, that Derek was gone, that vendors were suing and her accounts frozen, people stopped pretending. Clients canceled appointments. Friends distanced themselves. Even her own staff, the ones who used to hang on her every word, stopped responding to her messages. And then it got worse. Because Rachel had always cared about one thing more than money: status. She loved being the one invited to charity events, to tastings, to yoga retreats with women who drank $30 smoothies and called their husbands investors. That circle turned cold fast. I didn't even have to say a word. One by one, those women quietly removed her from group chats, unfollowed her, pulled their business from anything she touched. Melissa told me Rachel showed up at a wellness event 2 weeks later, acting like nothing happened. No one sat with her. No one even said hello. She left early, holding back tears. But the part that finally broke her, the part that made it real, that came the day she learned who really owned the lease to the building. She thought she'd burned every bridge. But she forgot that quiet men like me don't shout when we win. They sign papers. Months earlier, when I was still setting the trap, I bought the salon's property through a holding company. It didn't carry my name. But I controlled every decision, every signature, every clause. Tessa leased from that company, which meant, Rachel's second attempt, to start a pop-up beauty booth just a few blocks away, required city approval. A permit. And guess who sat on the review board as a private consultant? Me. I didn't block it. I just didn't push it forward. Let her file the paperwork. Let her wait. Let the application collect dust while her last credit card defaulted and she moved back in with her sister, sleeping in a guest room with floral wallpaper and no closet space. By the time she realized she'd lost everything, the salon she once called hers was thriving again. Tessa had rebranded the front room, expanded services, and added wellness treatments that doubled bookings in 3 months. Melissa got promoted. 2 new stylists were hired. And every Friday, I dropped in, not to gloat, but to check the plumbing, say hi, enjoy a coffee, and watch a business I helped build, run without chaos. Rachel never came back. She couldn't. She wasn't welcome, not in that building, not in that world, not even in the fantasy she used to sell herself. Because once the curtain dropped, everyone saw the truth. She didn't build an empire. She burned a bridge. And in the end, she had nothing left but ashes.